Let's go. Awesome. Hello, everyone. This is Tukon from LeadSift here. Today, I have a good friend of mine, Keith Caskey, with me. Keith's the VP of Sales and Marketing at Datamatics. And hey, Keith.
Hey, Tukan, how's it going?
Good, man. Good. It feels weird that I'm originally from India and I'm not right now in North America, and you are originally from North America and you're in India. So
You know what else is really weird? That your company is LeadSift, but you help with data. I'm Datamatics, and we help with leads.
I like that. I did not see that coming. I like that. That's nice. Cool. So today, for everyone that's joining in, I mean, we are going to be talking about how to generate qualified leads with intent data. Specifically, I mean, qualified lead generation is probably the most important thing talking to every marketer out there. But more and more, we've been hearing about this avenue or channel, content syndication, as a source of demand gen, lead generation. And I personally do not know enough about it. And I know you are an expert, Keith. So that's the reason I reached out to you. So thank you for your time. I know it's super late in India. So before we dive into the meat of the content, do you want to give a quick, brief introduction with yourself?
Sure. So Tukan, thank you for the kind words. So as you mentioned, my name is Keith Caskey. I'm with Datamatics. I've been with Datamatics for a little over a year now, but I've been in the B2B data, B2B lead generation, B2B marketing space for a good portion of my career. I've been in India for about 4 years now. You mentioned that it's funny that you're in North America. I'm in India, and that's, roles of reverse, but I'm originally from New York. I've been in sales my entire career. I started in sales while I was in college. I worked for Verizon Wireless. I've been in pretty much every channel of sales, whether it's retail, direct, inside sales, outside sales, B2B, B2C, you name it, I've done it. I've managed teams. I've been an individual contributor. I've looked after marketing solutions. I've done this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, I'm a sales guy at heart. Marketing's my passion, and that's why we're here today. We're here to talk about lead generation, content syndication, intent data, and really how to help fellow marketers achieve all their goals.
Awesome. Love it. So let's dive right in then, Keith. I guess the first question that I have for you is, what is content syndication?
Okay, really good question and really vague and broad question. But so let's step back for a second. So if you look at a traditional organization, they have a marketing team. And within that marketing team, it's usually broken down into various teams. So you'll have somebody responsible for internal communication, internal marketing, events, marketing operations, content, demand gen, you name it. Now, multiple functions within one department, they'll all have their own roles and responsibilities, but at the core, content is really the glue and what brings everyone together. And content is what will ultimately drive and define an organization's marketing efforts. So unfortunately, it's really not that simple. Content, it'll bring business in. So content, it's not as simple as writing a great blog or creating a wonderful white paper. If you don't drive traffic to the white paper, if you don't promote it, if no one's viewing it, I mean, what's the point of having content? No one's looking at it. So that's really where content syndication comes in. In the traditional sense, content syndication is taking a piece of content. That piece of content can be a white paper, case study, infographic, whatever, any piece of collateral, taking that and republishing it on multiple sites to ultimately create as much demand as possible. So when I say put it on multiple sites, traditionally, again, in the traditional sense, a lot of organizations will publish it, and they'll reach out to publishers that will host it, and almost think of it as a barter. The publisher will get free and relevant content, and the solution provider or the owner of the content will be able to promote their collateral and ultimately provide a backlink to their website to boost organic traffic. But is that enough? Will that give you the volume? Will that give you the demand? Will that give you the leads that you and your team really require? So in an ideal world, yes. In an ideal world, you'll have your content syndicated on the front page of TechCrunch or any high traffic site that people go to first thing in the morning. But unless you're IBM or Google, or you just came up with a vaccine for COVID, that's not going to happen. It's just genuinely not that easy. And I think that's ultimately the goal for every marketer. But what I see a lot of marketers do, and the biggest mistake, is that they try to force demand and just publish it everywhere. So they'll take their content and disseminate it everywhere, and anyone that's willing to take it, they'll put it. And that backfires because Google, if you have that piece of content, Google kind of will flag and penalize anything that's been duplicated.
Yeah.
So, and it also destroys any and all of your SEO efforts. So that's really not a good idea. But there are a couple precautions you can take if that is a strategy you're gonna take. You can put your content in print form. So instead of just text, you can put it in a PDF, or you can put it in HTML, or it can be in an infographic, or audio and video also work really well because they're not easily detected by the algorithms that Google has established. But just by publishing that content and putting it on various sites, are you really creating demand, Toucan? Like, are you going to rely on these publishers? Are you going to rely on your SEO efforts? Are you going to rely on social to get people to go and visit your collateral that you've worked so hard on creating? So what do? You got to get the content out there. You have to drive traffic. So what a lot of marketers do, and I guess what the modern day term of content syndication is taking a piece of content and promoting it through various email and telemarketing campaigns, and making sure that everybody is able to see the content that you're wishing to promote and that they have access to it. And then you can also gauge it a little bit better. So for instance, if I run an email marketing campaign on your behalf, I'm promoting your content, and you'll be able to ultimately see who's viewed your content and ultimately what they did with it.
Oh, that's great. So you answered sort of one of my secondary questions from there on, was how does it work? So that's great. I'll dive a little bit deeper into this then, Keith. At a high level, from what I understood from what you said, was content syndication in its truest form is basically taking the content that you have, repurposing it, or basically having it published or distributed on other channels to
Absolutely.
leverage their audience to drive demand and traffic. Like, that is in its truest form. And there are different ways it could be done. Like, for example, as you said, one of them is publishing on a high traffic website or a relevant website that will have more eyeballs, or telemarketing and email and things like that. Now, going deeper into this, are there any specific kinds of content that perform better? Like, let's say we are doing a webinar. Can I use content syndication and the webinar is done? So I have the video and I want people to view it. And I want as many people, relevant people, to view this webinar after it's done, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, content syndication, it's promoting any type of content. So people will promote blogs, they'll promote press releases, articles, promote webinars after they've taken place, infographics, any piece of collateral an organization has, I've seen be promoted as in a content syndication program. What we see the most of, it's going to be a white paper. I think about 80 or 85% of all of content syndication programs are going to be white papers. And that's not just something that we've seen at Datamatics. It's something that a lot of studies have shown, that 85% of organizations will use white papers as their main source of content syndication. But is that the best performing? I would say no. I would say in 2020, where everything is becoming more visual, even on LinkedIn, I've been doing a lot of video, a lot of audio over the past week, and it's crazy the amount of views that somebody gets on a video versus a text. And the same applies to content syndication. So if you make something a little bit more interactive or personalized, or something video, pre-recording webinar or video message, it's going to yield better results than something like an infographic or just HTML that people have been seeing day in and day out for the past 10, 15 years. So yes, white papers are going to be the most common form, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily the most successful. What I would recommend to anybody that is interested in a content syndication program is to not limit yourself to just one medium. So use multiple sources. So if you have a webinar, promote the webinar. But if you have a new case study, promote that. If you have a blog, or if you don't have a blog, create one. Just as many different sources of content that you can create, the larger audience that you'll be able to reach out to, and ultimately the more interest you'll be able to gauge.
Makes sense. So now one question that immediately comes to mind, and we hear this more and more, is privacy. So you have this content, you have published, put it on someone else's property, you're driving people to download or view that content, they have to put in their information. Where does privacy and GDPR compliance and all these things opt-in fall into this in content integration?
That's a really good question, and I think GDPR is on the forefront of every marketer's brain, and especially with CCPA coming into effect in the US and other states following suit. It's how do we ensure that we're being compliant, but yet reaching out to as many people as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can't speak for every vendor because there's hundreds, if not thousands of them out there, but at Datamatics, we do a couple of things to ensure the privacy and ensure that we are remaining compliant with the various different laws. So I think the most important thing an organization has to do is have somebody within their legal or compliance team be familiar with all the nuances of each and every law, both at a national and a state level, especially in the US, know the nitty gritty. I think from there, opt-in is paramount. If you have a list of people that have opted in, that is going to be great because they've opted in. It's basically bypassing any regulations because they've agreed to receive any communication from your company in the future. And a good portion of our database is actually opted in already, and they're already receiving email campaigns from a variety of our different clients. But people that haven't opted in, or say, for instance, we onboard a new client that has a very niche market, and we may not necessarily have the database that they're looking for that is already opted in. So what do we have to do? We have to go out and source the data. So to source the data, there are a number of compliance issues that come into play. But where Datamatics and where we kind of pride ourselves is that we are fully GDPR compliant. We're fully CCPA compliant, and every other compliance out there like TCPA is that we're sourcing all the information from publicly available sources. We're giving people the opportunity to opt out if they don't want to receive the information. And the biggest thing is we're only reaching out to people that have shown legitimate interest. Now, legitimate interest can be expressed in a multitude of ways. One is intent data. Another is it pertains to their daily job. And there's just so many opportunities for us to kind of check all the boxes. But as an organization, we ensure that we are doing so when we reach out to each and every one of our prospects on behalf of our clients.
Got it. So would you say then, Keith, I mean, every vendor is slightly different, but in general, leads that are generated through content syndication programs are typically safe to assume that they're sort of opted in, and the customer, once they have acquired these leads, they can nurture them?
Exactly. So let me just kind of walk you through how a typical content syndication program would work at Datamatics. So say you're my client, Tucon, and you're essentially, the first step would be to kind of lay out what your target audience is. So you're looking for anybody in a marketing function, anybody in North America, seniority level, manager, whatever the case is. So once we're on the same page and what your target market is, from there, we then determine what your goal is. Okay. So now your goal is to generate 500 leads per month that have opted in. So now that we've got the parameters set, first step would be to kind of take a look at our existing database for anybody that's opted in for receiving communication from us, and then to have checked the boxes on marketing, intent data, whatever the case is. So our first step would be to reach out and promote your collateral on your behalf to everybody that's opted in to receiving communication. Now, in an ideal world, yes, we have the names and numbers and email addresses of everybody that's opted in, but that's not always the case because the universe is massive and not everybody will respond. So sometimes we have to go out and build the data that meet your criteria. So once we finish the opt-in portion, we then go out and build the criteria build the data based on the criteria you set, and we'll send an email campaign to both the opt-in as well as the freshly built data that will promote the content. Once the content is promoted, it'll essentially redirect somebody to a landing page, which hosts your content. At that stage, what happens is there'll be just various fields and forms that they need to fill out. So Tucon, DOS, CEO, LeadSift, phone number X, Y, and Z. And then there's going to be a couple checkboxes. I consent to LeadSift and Datamatics reaching out to me for future whatever, and also I agree to download this particular piece of content. So at that point of time, what will then happen is you hit submit. You'll be then emailed the piece of collateral that you just willingly downloaded, and then also you've ultimately opted in to receiving future communication. So then you'll be put in the database that we can then share with you saying, okay, Toucan, these people have opted in, these people have downloaded your content, and they're willing to receive communication from you in the future.
Perfect. Perfect. No, that's great. One follow-up question is this favorite three-letter acronym I have to use, ABM.
Okay.
Do you see, from a content syndication perspective, ABM campaigns work better than just targeted buyer persona based? Meaning, let's say I have a white paper, and instead of saying, hey, I want to target B2B marketers at these companies or like these type of companies, if I tell you, hey, promote this white paper to a list of these 1,000 accounts that I have defined based on whatever parameter. Um, any insights on that, Keith?
So, yes. So traditionally, there are two ways to kind of approach your target market. There's the ABM, which you're focusing on key accounts and the key personas with the niche account, or there's the spray and pray, where you're basically looking at a typical persona and reaching out to anybody and everybody that meets that criteria. Now, both have their advantages. When we take an ABM approach, you're going to be very specific in terms of the accounts you're focusing. You can tailor your collateral to that particular account and make sure that it's completely relevant. So in one sense, it is going to be the most successful because it's going to be the most tailored. You're reaching out to somebody at IBM talking about everything that's in their wheelhouse, and everything is tailored and geared specifically towards them. Now, alternatively, if we take the other approach, this spray and pray, you can do the same thing, but from a persona perspective. Instead of just reaching out to anybody and everybody, you can focus it. So one campaign is directed towards marketing, one's marketing ops, one's demand gen, one's content. So I wouldn't say that one method is more successful than the other, as long as everything's segmented and everything is researched properly, which ultimately boils down to how accurate is your data. So if your data is accurate, if your data is full of all the information you need, so you have company information, industry, sub-industry, company size, geographies, all of that fun stuff, as well as the persona information. So not only job title, but if you talk about the job function, you can easily tailor your message without doing hours and hours of research to make sure that each and every email is ultimately tailored.
Got it. Got it. That totally makes sense. And I guess from there on, I guess let's talk a little bit about data. And you talk about the quality of data. Obviously, there is the firmographic stuff, right? Like, company size, industry, and all these things filled out. What about additional data, meaning intent specifically? Obviously, no bias there. Where do you see this playing in the whole content syndication space, Keith? I mean, where
Well,
you?
Based on your question, I'm assuming you want me to turn it back to you and say, what is intent data? Because that's a really good question, Toucan. So I think when people say, what is intent data? Intent data can mean a number of different things. So intent data can mean, are we looking at companies that have shown buying signals and we'll take an ABM approach as you rightly described? Or is intent data somebody specific that has shown a buying signal and that they individually want to buy? Also, does intent mean that we're kind of taking a look at some complex algorithms in determining intent? Are we taking a look at IP addresses, triangulating information, that's determining intent? Are we gauging people that have opened emails or liked a status or this? Is that what's determining intent? So I'm not going to answer your question, Toucan. I'm going to kind of flip the script and put it back onto you. What is intent data?
Yeah, well, okay. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, before I describe what intent data is, and traditionally what it means is, buying intent, meaning the probability of someone buying your product or services. There is no single source of intent data out there. I just want to put it out there. There's a lot of misconception around it. Just because of the term buying intent, people think, whoever I buy buying intent data from, whether it LeadSift or anyone else, their first initial reaction is, this is intent and they're going to close their hot leads. Sometimes it happens, but no one can guarantee that. So that's the first thing. The way we look at intent is, it's basically the probability of a company at any given time looking to buy your product or services. And that cannot ever be guaranteed be said, like this company, it can be predicted based on certain triggers or proxies. Those triggers could be IP matching, as you said, as some companies do, or it could be the approach that we take is by crawling different sources of information, publicly available information. It could be, if I see someone engaging with a competitor of Datamatics, that could be a signal. If you see someone researching about lead generation or content syndication or talking about a webinar that we are doing, that could be a signal for you guys. If you see someone hiring for a specific role right now where they say content syndication as one of their roles and responsibilities, that could be a signal. If we see someone mention something in an SEC filing talking about content syndication and demand generation, that could be a signal. If we see someone attending an event like B2B SMX event, that marketing exchange that happened, if there's marketers going to that, that could be a signal. So what we do is we basically crawl the web 24/7, looking for these nuggets of information that in theory, if you had 1 million lead researchers, they can manually find out, but you don't have it. So it's basically collecting all of this information at scale automatically, and then adding it together up to an account and saying, hey, this account had these many signals. It could be, the director of IT was doing this, the head of marketing was doing this, they were also hiring, they did this, that, all in the last 30 days. All of this is happening, giving me an indication that they might be more likely to buy your solution, pay closer attention to that. So that's what we consider intent.
So
go ahead.
Makes sense, obviously. So any kind of data that you were talking before about what other data fields are going to be important when you're reaching out and you're building this database for your content syndication program. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about any lead gen program, it just imagine a funnel. So you have the top of the funnel, mid funnel, bottom of the funnel, and ultimately closures are at the very end. Now, where does content syndication stand? Typically at the top. So content syndication is basically somebody that's shown a little bit of interest. They've downloaded a white paper, downloaded a case study, opted in receiving communication, but is that a lead? Yes, but is it? So you've done it, I've done it, we've all done it, where somebody sends us an email and looks interesting. We fill out the information so we can to take a look at the case study, to educate ourselves, to kind of, it piqued our interest, but we're not a buyer, we're not anybody relevant, but yet there was some level of interest. Is that a lead? No. But is that somebody for you to kind of reach out to in the future? Possibly. So we still will pass it on as a lead, but every organization will have a different term for what a lead actually is. So that's where qualified leads actually come into play. So when we talk about qualified leads, it typically starts by asking a series of qualifying questions. So in the traditional sense, we've talked about the content syndication, republishing, and then we've talked about the untraditional, or the modern day term, where a lot of B2B marketers are using these third-party companies to promote their content and pass that on as a lead. But is that really a lead? No. So what we like to do at Datamatics is insert a qualifying question into that. So once you fill out your name, your information, and agree to receive any opt-ins, then we just kind of ask a series of qualifying questions. Are you using any intent data platforms? Are you responsible? Whatever the case is, because it just kind of fine-tunes that lead a little bit more. But yet there's always that issue of me just kind of clicking this, clicking that, just to kind of see what collateral that I'll be sent once I hit submit. So what a lot of our clients will actually do is take that lead and further qualify it by using our telemarketing campaigns, where we'll reach out and say, hey, Toucan, this is Keith Caskey over at Datamatics. I noticed that you downloaded our white paper and you're currently investing in intent data, but just wanted to ask you one or two more questions. So we'll ask those questions, and it does a couple of things. It further qualifies the lead. So instead of getting a top of the funnel, you're now getting a lead that's kind of mid funnel. And also, even if we can't get in contact with them, because I mean, that's the nature of the beast when it comes to B2B sales and marketing, not everyone answers their phone. By reaching out to them or attempting to reach out to them, we can verify the contact details. So we pick up the phone, reach out, and we know that it's not a dummy number. We know that Toucan Das is on the other end by his voicemail. So you may not necessarily be getting a qualified lead, but you're getting quality lead. So before we finish all of our campaigns, and before we pass them along to our clients, they go through this where we do this voice verification and make sure that the leads are actually qualified to some extent by verifying the information and adding those 1 or 2 qualifying questions at the end.
So this is
Now, to take it even a step further, or to back it up a bit, that is kind of the standard approach that many organizations like us have taken over the past few years. But how can we generate leads, or how can we qualify leads further down the funnel and ultimately accelerate the sales cycle for our organizations? And I think that's where you guys come into play, or any lead intent data platform really, is by providing those intent signals. So instead of just reaching out to people that have opted in or building a database from scratch and reaching out to them, if we can do the same thing but refine it and only reach out to those accounts or those individuals that have shown intent, run that email marketing campaign, ask those qualifying questions, then pass it on, it's just going to save your sales team 2 or 3 steps in ultimately qualifying that lead, setting an appointment, conducting a demo, and then moving it from a opportunity or a lead to an opportunity.
So we just got a question from someone in the audience that said, how can you strike the right balance between following up and not appearing big brotherish?
Okay. Good question. So that it's a really good question. So when do you follow up, and how often do you follow up? And that's one of the what I tell a lot of my clients is, if you give me one piece of content, sure, I'll run with it, but give me a multitude. We don't want to repeat the same content. We don't want to use the same form. We don't want it to be HTML or infographic after infographic. Mix it up. So one time we can promote an infographic, next time a case study, next time a webinar. So it's not repetitive. It's not coming across as brotherish, and it's not a follow-up. Essentially, we're just promoting your content that essentially may be relevant based on your persona. Another way to avoid that is doing exactly what LeadSift provides, is providing intent. Now, if you're providing us intent signals when it comes to, say, cybersecurity, and I'm an organization like, I don't know, RSA, I know that I can tailor my pitch, focus on a particular sect or a section within cybersecurity, and it's not appearing as Big Brother where I'm just kind of giving a corporate message. All of my messages are going to be fine-tuned and tailored towards you.
But what about, so let's take the example of cybersecurity. Someone filled out a piece of content, you got their lead, but you're verifying, you're trying to qualify it further. You reach out to them and say, hey, Keith, I saw you downloaded this piece of content. Are you actually thinking of a cybersecurity solution? Do you think that's Big Brotherish, or what's your take on that?
No, so that it's a valid concern, and some of our clients will have us represent them as the publisher, the company that's actually promoting the content. So instead of going in as RSA, we'd go in as Datamatics and say, hey, my name is Keith. I'm calling with Datamatics. We noticed that you downloaded a white paper from RSA the other day. Just wanted to see if you have a few minutes to answer a couple of questions, and then kind of ask that. So not necessarily coming across as Big Brotherish. We're not kind of losing any respect from the RSA perspective, as we're coming in as a third party looking to basically answer these questions to further qualify that lead. Now, some people aren't comfortable with that. Some people will ask us to represent them, which I totally get. So yeah, we can do it both ways, and we've been doing this for long enough that we know what the balance is. We have established sequences. We have established cadences, that we're not reaching out to people every day. We're not reaching out to them only one channel. We'll use email, social, and telemarketing, so that we're taking an omni-channel approach when we reach out. So they're not being bombarded with emails. They're not getting 3 emails a week. They're not getting 5 emails a week, not getting 3 calls a day. So we're kind of spreading it out so we're not overbearing, and that they can respond to us when they feel comfortable doing so.
Perfect. So I know we are reaching the end of the time. So now you describe a lot in details about what is content syndication, what it's not, when it works, what kind of expectations you shouldn't have. And I thank you for that, where you said, is it a lead? Maybe it's not. You need to do further things. So that's great. So now let's say let's go back to the cybersecurity example. I'm listening in, I hear this, and I'm a demand generation marketer at a cybersecurity software company. I'm considering content syndication. How do I run a content syndication campaign? Can you walk me through the steps that I need from now?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of described it before too, Khan.
Yeah.
I think it's the first step is to identify the target audience,
Okay.
where we'd say, okay, this is what the target persona that you're looking for, type of company. These are the account lists we're looking to target. From there, we kind of build out the database, whether it's using opted-in contacts, a database we create, or using intent data, which we use from a provider like LeadSift. From there, we work on the collateral. We'd ask RSA to share multiple forms of collateral, white paper, case study, webinar, whatever the case is. We basically create the landing pages, we'd create the content, the bodies of the emails, and we basically share all of the collateral and the content we're looking to promote with you for sign-off before we go ahead and run it. Now, once we have all that information, we then run the campaign. So like, we don't want to appear big brotherish, so we're not sending the emails every day. We're not sending the same thing every day. We're mixing it up. So one day we'll send the webinar, next week we'll send the case study, following week we'll send a blog. We'll mix it up, but we'll be consistent. We'll give people the opportunity to opt out, and we'll really follow up with the people that open, the people that click, because those are kind of a little bit, not necessarily a lead, but they've shown a little bit of intent. That is a signal after all. So we'll push them a little bit harder, but the people that are showing no interest will back off a little bit. So what I also recommend all my clients is don't do this as a one-off. Yeah, we can, do this over the next 60 days and give you, 5,000 leads, but is that sustainable? We're over the next 2 months, we're going to build that audience. We're going to run 5, 10, 20 email blasts, whatever the case is. We'll pick up the phone, reach out to people, and we'll kind of build a pipeline from a marketing perspective, and just end the campaign at that. Is it worth it? Because there's so many leads that we've already touched that if we just kind of end the campaign there, they're dead leads, which at the end, they're not. So I like to tell all my clients, yeah, if you've got, I don't know, if your goal is this, great, sign up for that, but spread it out so it's consistent. So instead of doing 2,000 leads this month, do 500 leads for the next 6 months. It's a little bit more than what you were kind of originally looking for, but I think ultimately you're going to cover a larger audience, and you're going to leave no stones unturned, and ultimately you're going to create demand. And that's ultimately what content syndications or programs are about. Not necessarily about generating leads, which using a vendor like Datamatics will do, but it's ultimately about creating that demand and making people aware of your solutions, making people aware of your offerings. So when they do have that need, when they have intent, then it's kind of, they know who to turn to, and they don't need to kind of go to Google and say, who can help me with cybersecurity?
100%. So if I could just add one best practice question then, Keith. So you ran the campaign, you generated 500 leads over 6 months. What's the best practice there? Like, as a marketer of RSA, would I then give it to my SDRs, or would I keep on nurturing them now that are in my funnel, top of the funnel, albeit?
Really good question, and every company does it different. Some companies will consider a content syndication lead as a hot lead. Some will just put that into a nurture campaign. Some will take any data from an event, whether it's a booth scan or somebody that attended, and put that in a nurture campaign. Where other organizations will only put people in their campaign that have explicitly opted in. So it really depends from organization to organization. But what I've really kind of seen the best is don't give up on that particular lead. So if you have that lead that's opted in, they've received, answered a qualifying question, there was some interest. It may not necessarily be a lead, because they, like I said, they may have just kind of went through the motions, downloaded it, but there is some interest. So if there's some interest, they're either at the right organization, they're either in the right job title, they may not be senior enough, or they may not have that requirement at all. So I would put them in a nurture campaign, but before doing that, I would assign them to my SDR team or my BDR team to continue to promote our solutions, continue to reach out to them. And it's a layup. Okay, you've downloaded my white paper, you've downloaded my case study. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. So that's great. That's all the questions I had, and I think we're almost near the end of time. But there's another follow-up question, Keith, and I guess for the attendees that are here, feel free to ask your questions, and we'll try to answer them. So there's a very tactical question here, Keith, that says, should there be a follow-up strategy one should follow to close the deal? Any standard follow-up procedure from these leads?
I just kind of touched upon that. It really depends from organization to organization. I think a lot of marketers, unfortunately, have this concept, well, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make it drink. So marketers will take this lead and pass it along to sales and say, okay, I gave you the lead. Now you do what you want with it. And I think that's the wrong approach. And ultimately, if I could start my career over, I'm a sales guy, and I would spend the first 2 years of my career as a marketer, because you really understand what a marketer's pain points, marketer's challenges are. And I think every marketer should do the same thing, start their career in sales, because there's such a disconnect between sales and marketing. What's a lead, what's not, how to follow up. So if I were to give any follow-up strategy or any follow-up advice, it would be just don't give up on a lead. It's a lead because they've shown some type of interest. They may not be engaging with you now, they may not engage with you tomorrow, but put a reminder in your calendar to follow up with them again 6 months from now, follow up with them 3 months from now, create an RSS feed so you're finding out what company X, Y, and Z is doing. Subscribe to an intent data provider like LeadSift, where if something happens at RSA, you're getting those intents. So then you can then reach out and say, hey, John, I know a couple months back you downloaded my white paper talking about X, Y, and Z. I also read from this source that you guys are looking to invest. When would be a good time for you and I to speak? So then we can talk you through a little bit more about our solutions and how we can help you overcome our challenges. So my only advice is don't give up on a lead. A lead is a lead because they've shown some interest. And I think ultimately you have to take an omni-channel approach. So a lot of people rely on just one single channel, whether it's email, telemarketing, social. That's not the case. It's 2020. And, some people say email's dead. Some people say cold calling's dead. Some people say social selling's a new big thing, but it's not. So I think take an omni-channel approach, reach out to your leads, be consistent, be persistent, and don't give up.
Yeah, that's great. I have one more question. This is great. The audience is super engaged. One question that is what is the ideal time frame to get in touch with the customer since the search and the lead generation? Is there a sweet spot? Meaning after they've downloaded the content, is there a sweet time spot? Like I know if from an inbound perspective, when an inbound lead comes in, you're supposed to reach out within 5-10 minutes. But from a content syndication lead, is there
I think the same concept. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason for the strategy, but I think the sooner the better. Why it's fresh. If somebody downloads a white paper, personally, I think I'd feel a little bombarded or overwhelmed if why I'm still reading it, somebody says, hey, Keith, I noticed you downloaded my white paper. I'd be like, that's creepy. How do you know that? So I think the sooner the better, but be smart about it. Don't pick up the phone and as soon as you get the notification, call them. Give them some time. Give them an hour. Give them 2 hours. But because when they download it, it's an intent signal. So as an intent provider, what do your customers tell you? Is there a sweet spot? Or if somebody shows intent today, when do you advise them to reach back out?
For us, it has to be within a week. That's what we say. Because intent has a time component to it. So the longer it gets, after 90 days, the intent goes down. So that's what we tell our customers. But what we suggest is they are not coming to your website and saying, hey, I need to download this white paper or request a demo. They're showing some activity on the external web. So the way you engage them or follow up is different than a content syndication lead, but it is time sensitive. You have to reach out within a week so that it's top of mind. So if this marketer at RSA, and I guess we are just hitting up RSA too much, but let's say marketer at RSA is engaging with a competitor of mine, I would want to reach out to them, not saying, hey, I noticed you're talking to a competitor of mine or doing this. I would say, hey, looks like you have some interest. Is it valid? A. B, I have some interesting data for you that I'd love to share with you. Just maybe a list of accounts that might buy from RSA because we're an intent data provider, and see what they say. And if they go and say, yeah, I'd like to take the demo, I'd like to see those accounts, boom, you just validated that intent. That becomes a very strong signal. They, from top of the funnel, warmish lead, they become way lower. And then.
Exactly. That's basically the same thing we do with when we televerify or telequalify all of our leads. So pick a content syndication lead, pick up the phone, ask them a series of qualifying questions to make sure that it is a valid lead. Now we do the same thing with intent data. So yeah, we notice that X, Y, and Z, you've shown a little bit of intent. Obviously we don't say you've shown intent.
Yeah.
Then we just ask them a couple of qualifying questions to really gauge whether that intent is real or if it's not. So I'll use kind of a different example that, or a past example rather, is when I was back in college 15 years ago, I worked for Verizon Wireless, and I worked in one of the malls in a retail outlet. Now, a lot of times people would come in and they'd be window shopping. They'd have time to kill. Their wife or husband were doing some shopping and they wanted to see the latest and greatest gadgets. While they were browsing around, they were in my cell phone store. They showed intent by walking in the store, no? But is that really intent to buy? There's a massive difference. Now, on the surface level, that's intent, no? But if we actually can pick up the phone and qualify that lead and say, hey, John, I noticed that you came into the Verizon store. Are you looking to buy a cell phone today, or were you just kind of shopping around? The same thing we can take and bring it to life when it comes to intent data, where, okay, we noticed that RSA is investing in content syndication strategies. And just ask a question or two to follow up on that. And then that becomes data, and that converts it into a lead. And instead of a top of the funnel lead, like a basic content syndication, it now becomes a mid funnel or a little bit more of a qualified lead, because we've had that interaction and they've confirmed a few things that we had doubts on.
100%. No, this is great. Thank you so much, Keith. One thing that I realize I tell our BDRs, whenever we have a piece of content, gated content, one of the things we purposefully do is, let's say whether it's you signed up for this webinar or you downloaded a content, one thing we purposefully try not to do is not reach out to them and hound them saying, hey, I saw you download my ebook, attended my webinar. Do you want to take a demo? Do you want to take a demo? Do you want to take a demo? That is not the right thing to do. And I think this was one of the questions. So basically what the approach we take is, okay, they have shown some form of intent by raising their hand and saying, I'd like to learn more about content syndication. So I'll be nurturing them. I'll be sharing this video with you. And hopefully when the time comes, when you think of intent or content syndication, either you're going to reach out to Keith or ourselves. I hope so. If not, I'm going to monitor you. I'm going to share content with you as the new stuff happens. And I'm going to see how you're engaging with the follow-up content. At certain point, when the timing is right, you are going to book a demo or something with me, or want to say, hey, I want to see a free sample request, or I want to run a content syndication code. Give me something. So I think the key is, from a content syndication perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, is once you get this lead, it is a form of them showing some form of intent, but it's not there for you to then hound them to close a deal, book a demo right away. So that would be.
Yeah, I think I agree. At the end of the day, people buy off people, and no one likes to be pitched. So I think if you reach out to somebody and say, hey, I saw you downloaded this, are you available for demo? No one wants a demo, right? Yeah. You've got to build the relationship. You've got to understand their challenges, understand their pain points, build a little bit of trust. And I think once you uncover their challenges and where their pains really lie and what their goals ultimately are, I think then if you have a solution, or then if you have an offering, then you could propose the demo.
Absolutely.
Because what's the point of me saying, okay, let's go on a demo if there's no interest? It's a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah.
But I think before you kind of even go into that stage and kind of progress that lead to an opportunity, you got to get to know that person, understand them as a person as well as a prospect, and really kind of understand what they're going through, and ultimately give them back a solution instead of a problem. And I don't know about you, but at Datamatics, we're not in the business of burning bridges or one-off relationships. We ultimately want to work with you, for an ongoing basis. And to do that, it requires all of that I just mentioned. You need to establish that relationship. You need to understand their pain points, and you can't just give them what they want, because it'll be a one and done, and no one wants that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. It clarified a lot of doubts and confusion I had about content syndication, what it is, what it's not, how to use it. Hopefully it's educational for the attendees and people that have signed up. This is being recorded, and probably in the next day or two, I'll send over the recording to everyone that has signed up. Again, thank you so much for this, Keith, and you have a great evening. It's pretty late.
You too. Yeah, you too. Awesome. Thanks so much, Tukan.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.